Welcome to the Real Appreciation Podcast. I am David Clair Bennett, and with me today is someone who has wrestled and been a part of some of the biggest wrestling companies on earth, from MLW to, yes, of course, his time in the WWE as the personal ring announcer for Alberto del Rio. He now runs Three Legacies Wrestling in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Please welcome to the show, Jesus Rodriguez, aka Ricardo Rodriguez.
Thank you. You definitely have that voice. You have that voice for podcasting and radio and all that stuff. So it sounds great. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, man, I appreciate you so much. And hey, thanks for doing this with me on such short notice too.
Yeah, and again, thank you for accommodating the fact that, hey, I have a free time right now, so you have time. So thank you.
Yeah, man, thank you. I want to open this episode with something I find so special as a former wrestler myself and also as a fan. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time is probably yours and everyone else's, is Bret the Hitman Hart. And which is it's crazy how you were one of the last people to wrestle Bret Hart in the WWE technically. So go ahead and talk to me about how that kind of opportunity came about for you.
Well, to this day, and I like this story, but I've said it 1,000 times and I don't want to jinx it. Because, I mean, obviously, Bret is still around, and what if he has like a retirement match and then I no longer carry that title. But I'm proud that for the time being, I'm still Bret Hart's last TV match in WWE. And I'll carry that until it's not. For the longest time, we were Edge's last match, and then he came back, and I'm happy he came back. But that was something that for a while we're like, man, that was kind of cool. Like, we were Edge's last match, Bret Hart's last match. I don't know if that's a good thing that we were like the killers of careers. I don't want to call it that, but no, it was a cool little experience, man. It was, obviously, we all grew up watching Bret Hart. We all know who he was, the sharpshooter, the colors, the pink, the black, and then the glasses, and it was awesome. I had a chance to meet him a few times prior to this match, and we were at, what was it, like, Ontario or Calgary or Alberta? I'm not sure which city it was, but point is, we were in Canada. And they reached out to, Road Dogg had sent a text to Alberto and myself that we were wrestling Bret Hart and John Cena in a tag match. And at the time we were like, yeah, whatever, dude. But we never got that LOL afterwards. So it kind of happened, and we show up, and sure enough, it happened, and it was just so surreal. It was awesome. It was so much fun, and just to get put into the sharpshooter and then to tap out of it. And yeah, it was awesome. Super awesome experience.
That's amazing, man. And another thing that not a lot of people can say is that they've wrestled a match on WWE television while also wearing a Justin Bieber t-shirt, which, by the way, no shame in being a believer, man. Guy's got good music.
Actually, no, it wasn't until afterwards that I realized, and I actually started listening to Bieber, that he has some good stuff. So does like the Jonah Brothers. And I'll admit, man, I was a Jonah Brothers hater. I was same with Justin Bieber, and I actually I there was a couple of songs that I was like I found myself nodding. I was like, cool, this is cool. And then you're like, that's Justin Bieber. I'm like, no, what? Get out of here. And then sure enough, I downloaded them, and they're on my phone now. And but same with Jonah Brothers, same with like what was the other one? Kesha, some Taylor Swift. Lady Gaga. I was a hater in the beginning until I started actually listening to it, and I was like, man, these are kind of cool. I dig it.
Same here. Same exact
Billie Eilish was another one I didn't like at first, and actually like sat down and listened to it. I was like, these are cool.
In 2012, I was about to graduate high school. You were feuding with Santino Marella, and you found yourself at the hands of the vicious Cobra attack. And I've always wanted to know, that Cobra, real venom?
Oh man, it's deadly. It is that Cobra is deadly, but it's not deadly in the sense of it kills you. It's just deadly. It stuns you, and then you don't feel anything for like 30 seconds, 3 seconds. You don't feel anything for 3 seconds.
Have you seen JTG take it?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely. He would do like the Devon Dudley shake.
But all jokes aside, man, I find it so incredibly great to see a true fan like yourself making their dreams come true. I mean, you got to work with John Cena, Bret Hart, Alberto del Rio, WrestleMania, Edge, Adam Copeland. Dude, that's amazing. Congratulations.
think it's a lot of stuff that I didn't understand until after it happened, and I didn't appreciate it until after.
Yeah.
Just who my coaches were, in FCW, who even before WWE, who my coaches were. Like on the local scene in California, my main first trainer was this guy named Latigo Blanco, and he was a straight Mexican lucha libre style, and then it was so awesome, and I loved it, and because that's what I grew up watching was lucha. And eventually I switched over to the American side, and I was trained by several folks. The first folks that kind of guided me was these guys named Nemesis, Zocre, and Phoenix Star, who in PWG were known as Los Lucha. So if you ever look them up in PWG, like, dude, the stuff that they did and they still do is awesome. I switched over from there to a couple other individuals. There was this guy named White Trash Johnny Webb, who took me under his wing for a little while, and he was from XPW. And then just like learning from different folks around the area, it was awesome. Scorpio Sky, back then Joey Ryan, Scott Lost, and just learning from them. Premium Tornado, the whole PWG crew, right? Um, and eventually I ended up going to go get trained by like Rikishi, Orlando Jordan, Gangrel, Reno, NOI, Black Pearl. So I got immersed into the Samoan family for like 2 years roughly.
Wow.
And that was just an experience in itself, training under Alpha NOI, rest in peace. Um, that was beautiful, and it was just awesome. And then eventually, once I got signed, who my coaches were, in FCW, Rick Steamboat, Norman Smiley. Once I got out to the main, in the main roster, who my coaches were up there, D Malenko, Arn Anderson, Michael Hayes, Jamie Noble, Triple H, Vince, those were my coaches. And then obviously once we started wrestling and who in the ring, CM Punk, Rey, Edge, Christian, Kane, Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, right? So you look at the lineage of who were my guides and my mentors along the way, and like, dude, that's pretty freaking cool. And you get a little bit from each one, and then eventually you get this from this guy, you get this from that guy, you learn all these different things plus your own personal experiences, and then you mesh it all into what I know now. Which I know my knowledge is unique to anybody else because nobody else has my lineage of who my mentors were. Just as some other people, have what they had prior to the Indies, who their coaches were, what their personal experiences were, and then once they got to WWE, who their main mentors were. Um, so yeah, it's pretty cool in retrospect when I look back at my tree of my coaches. And actually, I'll show you something
Sure.
in my office. I have my main trainers, Ricky, Norman, Latigo Blanco in the middle, Gangrel, Malenko, and William Regal. It's kind of cool.
I wanted to ask you, what was the moment when you knew you made it, but I'm wondering if it was after all of this had ended in the WWE. Was that when you realized what you had taken for granted, like we were talking about earlier?
There was I think a couple of moments when I realized, hey, this is kind of cool. I made it. I think uh, there was instances like the first Rumble that we did. Obviously, the first time that I flew out to Boston. That was my first non-California event that I did for WWE. So they flew me out, and that was like a week after I was signed. So that was kind of cool. My first WrestleMania at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. That was a very surreal moment because I remember sitting on one of the chairs ringside, and and I'm looking around, and I'm like, this is cool. Like I'm here. I'm here. And I was there was another point too in that same day where myself, Alberto, and Edge were just standing on the ramp and we're just talking. And there was a photographer who took a picture and he sent it to me later on. And I wish I still had it, but it was one of those like candid ones where we're all just kind of like having a coffee and just laughing. And I was like, dude, this is freaking cool. Um, and there was a lot of instances as we went along, the first action figure, the video game, those were pretty cool little instances. And it wasn't until after I left WWE and it really sunk in that I'm no longer there that it really kind of hurt that I gave it all up. because I'm the one that asked for my release. Like they never called me and said, "Hey, you're gone." I had asked for my release, and yeah, it happened, and
Yeah.
yeah, there's times where I regret making that call where I was like, I'm done. But the second, the more I realize, the more I'm like, like I'm glad that I kind of did in retrospect. I miss it. Don't get me wrong, I miss it. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have gone to India. I wouldn't have done Australia. I wouldn't have done England. I wouldn't have done, working for television in Mexico and Puerto Rico, in the US. I wouldn't have gone to Egypt for a year to open up a wrestling school. If it wasn't for me leaving, I wouldn't be here now in Lancaster with Three Legacies Wrestling. So like, sometimes when things don't work out, they work out.
Yeah, and there's still so much time. You're still very, very young, man.
38 going on 30 in a couple of months. That in 3 months. Jesus, 2 months.
I'm gonna be 30 very soon. It's okay.
Yeah. But no, I still have obviously years, ahead of me. And so long as I still have breath in me, like I'm too stubborn to not be in the ring. And so I'll be in the ring as much as I can.
I think it's very safe to say we will see you back on WWE television one day in the future.
That's my hope. That's on my vision board, and that's my wish for down the road.
Speaking of your lucha past, someone I know you have worked with in WWE was Rey Mysterio, as we were talking about earlier, who's such a legend, man, in so many different ways. I'm just curious to ask, because I've never asked before, what does being in the ring with Rey Mysterio feel like?
It's so real. I mean, not just like it's like anything else, right? He's like you're somebody that you looked up to, and you're like, man, this is kind of cool. And then I think also being in the ring with somebody who's very unselfish. He is very unselfish. He always, yeah, if he felt like a certain spot or something was good for the match, that he would always suggest it. And he's like, hey, at this point, get involved, do this. And yeah, he was very selfish, unselfish, excuse me. He was very unselfish. Um, and always love him for that, and just for what he's done, for who he is, for what a legacy that he's built. He's very giving, and that's something that goes a long way.
As the title of this show is called Real Appreciation, one of the most important things in my life is being both grateful as well as appreciative. And as someone who battles issues with things such as addiction with food and eating disorders and depression, if you're comfortable talking about it, I know that you have an incredibly inspiring story of getting sober. And I know that it's one that can truly inspire millions of people out there. And I'd love if you're willing to talk about it, to tell everyone just how bad things have gotten at one point and how you were able to make one of the most inspiring comebacks of all time.
It's always because I do these like public talks at like rehab centers, and um it's not the easiest thing. I know it's important, and I know it's therapeutic, but it's always hard to start because I have to show vulnerability. You know how hard that is to let down my guard and then let somebody in, when for the longest time all I knew was how to keep my guard up and how to shield up, and to let people in. That's so hard, especially because we're men. And I know I've said this in the past too. Like, that's a culture that we grew up in, that we're men, we're not fucking pussy. Sorry if I'm cussing, but like that's a mentality that we grew up with, that we don't talk about our feelings. That's not very manly. um and again, that's just the ideology that we grew up with. And as we got along and came along in life, we realized, like, no, it is important to share what our feelings, what our emotions are, because ultimately what would happen is, if you bottle it up, it'll just explode eventually. It builds up and it fizzles, and then it just eventually erupts, and then God forbid there's somebody innocent nearby you when it finally explodes, because you don't want to hurt anybody else. Obviously, it's one thing if you hurt yourself, but it's a whole other thing if you hurt somebody else because of your dumbass, because you refuse to open up and share with somebody your emotions. And I've been guilty of that on multiple occasions, where I built up. Eventually, I exploded, and there was innocent folks around me, and then they were unfortunately there to hear my stupidity. um, I know that how I I handle things a lot differently than a lot of folks, and I know it's maybe insensitive sometimes, but I make fun of myself. Um, because then I realize how silly some of it is in my head, right? I have all these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts sometimes, and then when I say it out loud, I make fun of myself, like, you know how dumb that sounds? Like, stop it. That's dumb. Like, go outside, go touch some grass. Like, again, this is how I talk to myself, and that's what helps me.
Mhm.
Um, because the more I bitch and complain, the more I realize like nobody cares to a degree, right? Let me explain that. So the world will go on. Um, but obviously our influence on the world is affected, and you don't you affect other people. It's like that butterfly effect. Your reaction, your emotions, your thumbprint on this universe does matter. It really does. What doesn't matter is that nobody wants to hear you constantly complaining, because then they're gonna push you away. um, and I was very good at that. I was very good at blaming somebody else. It was never my fault. It was always somebody else's fault. Uh, Life is not going my way because of you. You're the reason why my life is not the way it should be. I left it because of all of you, and ultimately it's me, right? But because I never found a way to express myself, and I just kept blaming everybody else. And it wasn't until I got help, and I therapy, and then I had to do a self inventory and realize, like, no, a lot of it is because of me. A lot of it is because of me, because I allow certain things to happen. I never set boundaries, either external or within myself. And then the few boundaries that I did set, I was always easy to just dismiss them, and then whatever. Um, but yeah, I had a lot of issues with alcohol, and the drugs came afterwards because of the alcohol, but the alcohol was the gateway to everything. Um, and it became an issue, especially during my time with WWE, and that led to a lot of choices that I made. And when I left, I had a lot of time and nothing to do, so the only thing that I could do was just go get messed up and get drunk and live a life of that, because that's all I knew. And then that was the only fix that I knew to missing that empty void that I had from WWE. And then the adrenaline from the audience. The only thing that I had to supplement that was alcohol, um, because I needed to feel that bit of a rush. I needed to feel that excitement, even if it was for a second, until the hangover kicks in and all that stuff. I needed that rush. I needed that adrenaline. It's that Eddie Guerrero promo that he cut on
Yeah.
Brock Lesnar, right? The addict. Yeah, I'm an addict, and unfortunately for me, when I left WWE, I didn't know how to manage any of my situations. Um, and yeah, and that sucked. But uh, yeah, I know I just rambled, and I'm sorry. I just
No,
kind of
no.
went all over the place. Um, but I'm glad now that I've come out of it, um, and as I've mentioned in the past, like it's not a thing that I can say I fully defeated it, because it can always come back. And the mental health issues, it's legit, and then those are daily battles that I'm glad that I'm not holding a lot of that stuff in anymore. A lot of it is just I dismiss it, because I have to weigh out the importance of it and how much I have to do, like a self inventory in my head. I was like, this is gonna take a lot of your time. It's not worth it. So just leave it alone. Don't give it any energy. Don't give it any power. Because the moment anything has power over you, like you're done. Um, I don't suffer from depression. I handle it. Um, and it helps. It helps. Getting help helps.
I'm so glad and appreciative that you took the time to talk to us about that, because I guarantee you your story can absolutely and will help somebody out there, even if it's just one person. So thank you.
And
So thank
that's
you.
the thing too. When we go out to these rehabs and we talk, my business partner Christopher Dreisbach, we have this series on YouTube called Night of Recovery, and that's the main thing. A lot of times is if I can reach just one person and change their life, whether they're the addict or whether they have somebody who is an addict and they don't know how to deal with them, right? If we can affect just one person, then we've made a difference. And the second part is, and it kind of goes hand in hand, is giving people the information of how that there is help, giving them the information and the power of knowledge of how to handle somebody who is going through it and how to not just give up on them. Because there are resources out there. The state will help you. There are, government offices that will help you. There are, people out there that will help you. And then oftentimes we're so like lost in our BS way that we never look up. But there's always an extended hand that's willing to help you out. But we're so like in our little bubble that we never look up at it.
Yeah, man. And that's actually a big reason why I even started this podcast just 3 months ago. And I'm so grateful that we've been able to reach over 3 million people in just
Good.
3 months.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm a suicide survivor. And I'm very open about that. Every day I battle that thought to take my life, but I choose not to in the case of helping one person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was a big thing for and I'm glad you're still here.
Thank you.
Um,
You too.
I went through something. It was around 2017, where I had heart issues, and then they put me on medication, um, and the medication just brought me way down. They were trying to regulate my heart rate, but like man, it just dropped, and I was just depressed and sad, and then just whatever. And at the time, I was dating this girl who she owned a gun, but she couldn't have it at her house, so she kept it in mine. And then one day it was just I was in my thing, I was in my mindset. Um, I had written a letter with a lot of FUs to people, and then there's a couple, hey, I love you type of thing, but there was a lot of I hate you, and you left me, you deserted me, whatever, right? All that stuff. It was my goodbye. And I remember that feeling of having the gun in my hand, and I was like, I'm done, man. I'm out. And for a reason, just I put the gun down and just yep. And yeah, I was like, I don't want to do that. That's
Good.
not the right way to go.
No, it's not.
Um, and that's another thing too that I'm glad in retrospect that obviously that I didn't do that because
Look at you now, man.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Uh, Life had a lot more in store for me. The universe is very giving. We just have to listen to it sometimes.
To get away from all the depressing stuff, we promise, guys, I want to talk about this amazing Three Legacies wrestling school you got in Lancaster, PA, which is only a 2 hour drive from me, by the way. If you ever need any help with anything, I got you. But dude, talk to me about that decision to open up your own wrestling school.
I have been very grateful that for the last almost 10 years now, since I left WWE, I have been very grateful that I've traveled the world and ran schools in different countries and different cities, throughout the US, in San Antonio. I used to help out, Chris Marvel, and he was awesome, 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 amazing person at Hybrid Pro Wrestling, Hybrid School of Wrestling. I did stuff there. I was helping out at Knox Pro for, every time I would go to LA and spend time there, I was helping teach at Knox Pro. Um, Pro Wrestling 2.0 in Orlando, Florida. I was helping out with that. And even though it wasn't mine, I basically ran it for like 2 years straight. I went to India. I opened up a school in India. I was there for 6 months. That was the Great Khali School. So I did that. I went to Australia. I was helping in Australia for a little bit. England, Germany, Spain. I spent time in Egypt. I lived in Cairo for almost a year. Um, and I ran a school over there, and then eventually I ended up here. So when I ended up going to rehab, my business partner, Christopher Dreisbach, he's the owner of the rehab center that I went to. Um, and he's a wrestling fan too. So when we started talking, we started chatting, and then I had mentioned where I've been and what I've done, and then he's like, "Well, why don't you just open up your own? If you've done this and this and this and this, why don't you just open up your own?" And then I was like, "Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go." So we started up through Legacies Wrestling. That was 2.5 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. It was August 2022. Yeah, 22. August 2022, and then it just ran off, and it took off, and the last 2 years has just been nonstop, and we've gotten to a point where we're constantly getting bigger venues because we need more space, and that's a good problem to have. we're traveling. Our stuff is on YouTube. Three Legacies Wrestling, the Facebook, social media, all that stuff. Right, it just keeps growing. The students that we have, three of them were just on AEW. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but yesterday compared to when we're filming this, so they were just on AEW. So they're moving around, and I have about like 23, 20, 25 kids. Yeah, students. They're all adults. Uh, so it's growing, and we have monthly shows. We have two shows a month: the student show, and then our main show, which draws anywhere between like 500 to 800 people a show. Um, and like I said, it's been kicking off, man, and I'm grateful for the guests that we have constantly. Chris Van Vliet came for a 2-year anniversary. Um, so it's kind of cool. It's really cool that it's just taking off, and like also my stubbornness that I'm gonna make this work, and I told myself I was gonna make this work, and damn it, it's gonna work.
It is working. And I'm so glad that you stuck around for it to work, man. Seriously.
100%, because it builds a platform. It builds a platform for these guys to live out the dream that I got to live. And I made so many mistakes in my life that I can guide them. And I see it all the time when certain guys, especially my kids, because I obviously keep a closer eye on them. When they start making some mistakes that I made, I'm like, hey, don't do that. But then I take back to when my parents would be like, hey, don't do that. That's stupid, or that's not right. And I remember when I was a kid, I was like, whatever. What do you know, mom? What do you know, dad? And then sure enough, because they've lived it. And same thing with the guys. Like there's a lot of stuff that I did, and both good and bad. And obviously when I see that they're doing good, I'm like, yeah, keep doing that. When they're doing bad, and I'm like, hey, don't avoid that. Learn from my mistakes. Um, I don't have kids of my own, but they're my kids, so I want them to have a great future ahead of them, much better than what I did.
Amazing wrestling dad right there. But hey, as we wind down here, every day in my life I make gratitude a priority, and something I take or pay homage to a mutual of ours, Chris Van Vliet, is I also say 3 things that I'm grateful for every day when I wake up and before I go to bed. I know you just recently answered this on the last episode of Chris Van Vliet's podcast, but what are 3 more things that you're grateful for in your life right now?
I'm grateful that I have been able to rebuild a sense of me. Not this. This is, don't get me wrong. This is great, and I love this. This is a big part of my purpose. But I got to find myself again, and I had a sense of who I was before the addiction, and obviously I lost myself, and I'm grateful that now I was able to refine myself, and a newer version, an older, wiser version of myself, a little uh, Yoda within me, basically. I lived a lot of traumatic experiences, and I came out on top of it, thankfully, but through a lot of tribulations through that course. So I was very grateful that I was able to refine myself, because I had lost myself for so many years, and I was gone, man. Like I'm so embarrassed for a lot of things that had occurred in my life during that time span. So I'm grateful that I refound myself. I'm grateful that I found a purpose for myself. Um, and I'm grateful every day, man, that I'm able to wake up, and I'm able to wake up sober. Uh,
Yes.
that's because it allows me to live life, in life's terms, and live happy.
You're 38 years old. You have so much more to go. I'm so proud of you, man. Genuinely, friend to friend, so proud of you. So keep it up.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Where can people find you and your wrestling promotion online?
So more or less, just look for Three Legacies Wrestling, and then you'll find me through all of that. I handle all the social media of it. So the important one would be either the Facebook at Three Legacies Wrestling, spell it all out, and or YouTube at Three Legacies Wrestling, spell it all out. Those are the 2 important ones. Follow as much as you can, subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff. We're trying to build something for the guys to enjoy, and have a platform for them to progress their future wrestling careers. So Three Legacies Wrestling.
Please follow 3 Legacy Wrestling. I will link everything in the socials description below. But also, please go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Real Appreciation. Thank you again, man. I appreciate your time.
Totally, man. Thank you.